Hey everyone, this is Ina in with you in the Fight Back. And today I want to read an essay I wrote called On Sentimental Revolutionaries and Why We Need to Dare. And it's come up to me, it's questions that have been in my mind for the past pretty much since I've always been a revolutionary, and it deals with a lot of problems I think we've had in the movement in general. Although I'm speaking mostly of the United States, I believe a lot of what I say probably applies to elsewhere. So let us begin. At the time I first became interested in communism, there really wasn't very much going on to make me feel optimistic. This was the tail end of the Clinton era, after all. The economic boom was still going. According to a so-called philosopher, this was the end of history. Yet I was taking the plunge as a communist. One of the few bright spots on the horizon was the revolution in Nepal. I read what I could on the People's War, shaking a small nation on the far side of the world. Here was a group of revolutionaries challenging the dominant paradigm and breaking through the consensus that revolution was dead. It was bold and refreshing. Yet most of those I encountered on the left were not quite so enthusiastic. The revolutionary groups I encountered, whether Trotskyists, Maoists, and anarchists, seemed to want to relive and reenact the old debates of 1917 or 1949. There were, of course, exceptions to all three of these tendencies, but I've but it's tended to be in a very large part just want to relive these debates. This is not to say that revolutionaries shouldn't learn from the past. They can and they should. Yet there is a distinct difference between learning from the past and being mired in it. The past was all some of them could see. They were not willing to learn from the struggles of the present. For these revolutionaries, it seemed that theory stayed in a box. It was to be kept pristine and clean until the outbreak of the appointed revolution when it could be dusted off. Yet theory does not stay in a box. It has to be in the world and immersed in the living struggles and diverse circumstances. If revolutionary communist ideas are not involved in living struggles, what good are they? Too many revolutionaries look at struggles such as Nepal or Venezuela or any number of cases and condemn them. Its condemnation is like that of a strict teacher who admonishes a student for being a little creative on an assignment. These revolutionaries look at current struggles through their oftentimes ossified theories and condemn these struggles for not following them. Yet, it is that the approach which revolutionaries should take? Is it not better to join in these struggles in whatever way is possible, depending on the situation? Don't fire broadsides at those struggling, but worry with them. Be willing to learn and adapt yourself in the battles ahead. Closely related to this, there seems to be a fear among revolutionaries about taking power. This may sound strange, but read closely, or listen closely. When you are mired in past struggles, and your theory is encased in amber, if you were to put it in a position to act upon it, what would happen? You'd have to learn. You'd have to shake off the dust off the theory. You'd have to take part in living struggles. You'd have to be willing to face the unknown. Is not the unknown something that frightens so many revolutionaries? Too often they look upon revolution as pristine and practically holy. The revolution then becomes corrupted once it touches power, like holy water to a vampire, and then becomes something we cannot support. Isn't there a joke said about many Trotskyists, at times unfairly, that they only support the revolutions that fail? Yet a revolution is a leap into the unknown. A revolution challenges the very makeup of our choices. It gives us new options. We can either learn from them or be cast aside to wallow in pristine theories. This was something that Victor Serge noticed nearly a century ago. Serge was an anarchist who was profoundly transformed by the outbreak of the Russian Revolution of 1917. Serge was intellectually and politically honest enough to recognize the sea change that the 1917 revolution opened up. He tried to explain the essence of Bolshevism to his fellow anarchists and get them to take up the new ideas unleashed by 1917. He could see that the anarcho-syndicalists and socialists had failed the challenge of war and revolution. The Bolsheviks had succeeded. It seems appropriate to look at Serge's reasoning in depth, since his criticisms of anarchist inflexibility bear so much relation to the revolutionaries of the current day. To Serge, revolutionaries who did not revise their ideas in the light of the Bolshevik Revolution had, from a sense of tradition, from routine, from inertia, from a sad lack of sense of reality, there are some who return to the notions of yesteryear and confine themselves to repeating them. These revolutionaries let history pass them by. In the words of Serge, they have forgotten nothing and learnt nothing. Those who remain on the roadside can rest assured that their ideas are untouched by reality as revolutionary storms approach. Serge plunged into the Bolshevik Revolution and accepted the consequences of that choice. He saw what revolutionaries had to do. They needed to have no fear of laying an irreverent hand on old dogmas which are greatly respected. We must have no fear of stepping off the established paths which seem so certain and which led us to fateful dead ends. This is necessary because life only rewards those who have succeeded. To survive and to conquer are the greatest virtues. Revolutionary theory was put into practice by the Bolsheviks. They did in deeds what other revolutionaries only talked about. As Serge summed it up, the Bolsheviks were the ones who dared, and that is all that counts. Even the supposedly anti-Bolshevik Marxist Rosa Luxemburg concurred. For all her criticism of the revolution, she praised the Bolsheviks for having dared. For Serge, the Bolsheviks had passed the test of war and revolution. He summarized the essence of Bolshevism as the will for revolution. This will for revolution meant the Bolsheviks didn't just have a proper theory all bottled up, but they were ready to act upon it. They were willing to take the leap into the unknown. Serge took this leap too. He admonished his fellow anarchists to see that this is how a revolution is. It is a fact. It is not how we dreamed of it, nor what we wanted it to be. Here it is. Are you with it or against it? The question is posed in this brutal fashion. Serge was with it. Yet the anarchists in their majority across Europe were not quite so willing to make the same choice as Serge. To the anarchists, they still laid claim to a higher revolutionary purity, and it must be said, with the best intentions in the world, yet all their dedication and even heroism succeeded only in multiplying sects. Serge recognizes that anarchists had to deal with reformists and other non-revolutionary currents. He praises them for staying true to the cause, yet the pursuit of theory had rendered them impotent and weak. Serge's remedy for the impotence of anarchism was to reform the movement in light of 1917. The anarchists had to change from being a subjective doctrine which is inexorable and indeed largely utopian. It should be brought back to the reality of the class struggle and its practical necessities. Could not Serge's words be a call to Maoists and Trotskyists of today as well? Serge goes on to say that anarchism must cease being the privileged possession of tiny sectarian groupings and contribute to the fullness and richness of the vast working class movement. In other words, it was time for anarchists to stop keeping their theories frozen and to throw themselves into the class struggle, whatever may come. Serge believed that anarchists needed to look at revolution much differently in light of the Russian Revolution. Revolution was not something that happened exactly according to theory. Rather, it is messy. Serge knew this, writing in the midst of the Russian Civil War. He took up the challenge of the hour. Anarchists needed to see that revolution is never the epic promised by historians. It is a storm which no one is spared, which uproots the strongest and where the unforeseen triumphs. The revolution could not be any other way. It had to uproot the old world and face its furious resistance. The revolution had to be willing to take up this challenge in order to win. Serge believed that for militants everywhere they had to face the concept of revolution as a reality. Hard and unrelenting toil, as opposed to the revolution of myth, is for the militant the first and one of the most important psychological gains of the years which have just passed. In the revolution of myth, militants could be content coddling their theories from the reality of struggle. Yet Serge knew that in the maelstrom of struggle, revolutionists are to act and accept the consequences. Is not the attitude of Serge to anarchists of his day worth repeating now? There are too many sentimental revolutionaries today, just like yesterday, who have just narrow party mentalities. They can't adapt to what needs to be done. They shrink from struggle and seek to keep their theories pure instead of testing them. Sometimes these revolutionists shrink so far from action that they go over to the other side. What does the lesson of our current sentimental revolutionaries and those of Serge's time teach us? For one, if we're serious about communist revolution, we can't passively wait for it. We need to act. There's no guarantee of revolutionary success even with action, though. Without action, there's a guarantee of certain failure. After all, if you're going to wait for every single objective and subjective condition of a revolution to mature, you will wait forever. There has to be political intervention by revolutionaries in order to change the so-called objective conditions. We need the act of revolution and to take responsibility for it. Revolutionaries can't shrink from the necessity of the revolutionary choice. We need to be willing to cross the threshold and take power. From there, we need faith in our cause and the courage to see it through to the very end.